So, welcome everyone to the recording of the synchronous meeting of debates in English literature and culture. We're very pleased to welcome the very federal group of participants we have on this course. We've been discussing in a previous meeting the various places where they reside or where they come from, which doesn't always mean the same place. You can find some of the places where people live, and which is interestingly varied and distant. And it's the possibility of an asynchronous course like this one that gives them the chance to take part in this MA, and we're very happy to see them all here today. We thought it would be important to have a synchronic meeting like today's, so that you would get a chance to meet other people on the course, to meet Lucia, Kamerath, and myself, who are responsible for teaching this course. And that's why we are here, basically. Let me just change something. There. You can still hear me. There's an echo. Okay, that should be better, right? Yes, excellent. So what we've been doing so far, and we're waiting for people to rejoin us, is that, whoopsie, there we go. Let me see. There we go. And here we are. We mentioned the different readings that people taking part in this course have been doing as part of their own personal interest. And that led us to think that it would be interesting for participants to discuss some of the topics that relate to those readings and to the material in this course in small groups. And that is what people have been doing. We have most of the people who were doing that rejoin us here now in this meet, but because we've been jumping around in different meetings, not everybody has come back. But perhaps we can see if people from group one who were discussing literature and the canon are here. Maybe they are here and they can tell us something about what they have discussed in their group and their short time together. Are people from group one here? No, they're not. That's a short answer to that question. Let's see, which groups are represented here now? Okay, group two, excellent. And group three. All right, well, let's have a look at group two, and maybe you can tell us a little bit about what you discussed.
Well, basically, what we were talking about is that culture is a language, and mostly you can't translate culture. Whatever you read, especially when you read a poem, that's at least what I always realize, is that when you read a poem and you want to translate it, you know the expression lost in translation. So culture is a language in itself, and at times it's like students ask you all the time, how would you say this? Or translating sayings or idioms. So I mean, what Rosie and I were discussing is that culture is in fact a language.
Mm-hmm. Well, culture is definitely considered a separate skill that students need to develop in order to fully develop their language skills. And you're probably all familiar with things like the Common European Framework and how it organizes the skills that students should develop, and the can-do statements and the things that they're supposed to acquire through the learning of language. And we came to realize back in the 90s and the early 2000s that it was important to develop intercultural skills, and perhaps that's one of the main things that we need to be able to develop in the age of AI and the age of translation tools, because those are the things that those tools usually don't get, right? And the the awareness of those cultural distinctions and the awareness of cultural issues underlying different linguistic elements is something that tends to require quite sophisticated cognitive skills and linguistic skills and cultural skills. And hopefully that's part of what this course is helping you reflect on, the fact that those cultural elements require a different approach to what it is to learn maybe vocabulary, or maybe become familiar with grammatical structures, right? But it is also an integral part of language learning and language for the purposes of communication, right? Which is what we have come to aspire to. And I think the idea that you were discussing is interesting in terms of when students ask you, how do you say this in Spanish, or how do you say this in English? And many times we, of course, the job of the translator there is a challenge for the people who do translation, but many of us often end up saying, well, you just kind of have to get it in the language rather than forcing the translation, right? But it is tricky. Yes. I want to know your name, because M12 SEP is
Marian. It's Marian. Marian. And actually, I know you, Christina. I've seen you at Lenguas Vivas many times. Yeah. And I know Lucia as well. And I know Lucia as well. We were mates, we were classmates. So I just wanted to see you. I saw you many times, and I said, "Ooh," and
Marian.
yeah, I
And
teach that.
I know that your work is quite. I'm very happy when I get students who have taken your courses, because I know that they will come with new outlooks and new approaches. So it's very nice to be able to actually talk to you and meet you, even though online.
Yeah, exactly. Well, we may run into each other now. I see you. I promise I will say hi.
Yes, me too.
For instance, I remember this student of mine asked me one day, I said, Marian, how can I say me la dejaste picando? And I said, well, there is one expression, but the thing is, it has little to do with football, because the English like chess, for example, and suppose that this is a chessboard, and I say, if you want to say me la dejaste picando, is you turn the tables on me. That's, I was like, really? Why? Well, because although they love footy, it's different in their culture what winning is all about.
Well, also, when we say the English, right? And there's some English people who like chess, some English people who like football, and some English people who, in different social strata or different parts of the country, will have different phrases that may be ephemeral, that we may never even learn, because they will never be recorded in any context. Although now we have a lot more audio and spontaneous speech to have access to than we did in the past, right? But it's definitely a good point. I find a lot of those parallels with food, because I'm into food rather than sports, but that's a personal preference. Anyway, excellent, Marian. Thank you so much. Lovely to meet you. Right, so we had people from group 3 as well in this group. Yes, Mariela, would you like to tell us?
Yeah, we were just, for instance, mentioning dystopias or science fiction as, I don't know, literature as a catalyst, in the sense that they warn us what could happen to the world if we continue with certain practices or thoughts or, I don't know, ideas. Basically that.
I spent the last weekend watching all the Black Mirrors that I hadn't watched when they came out, the last season and the previous ones, that, you know, completing my Black Mirror awareness. And yes, definitely, there's a lot of impact that we have had on our environment, on you know, our environment, both natural and artificial, the one that we've created, and we keep modifying that environment and what is acceptable and what is not acceptable. And it's particularly troubling when we think about young people who are so immersed in their devices, who are so dependent on them for everything, for their social interactions, for their access to information, for if it's not online, it doesn't exist. If it's not, and then those things that happen in those contexts that we're not even aware of. And many of you have probably watched the series Adolescence, which was all the rage about them. Oh, you should. It's very interesting in terms of seeing how people, young people, can live parallel lives essentially, and we're not even aware of what is happening with them. Interestingly, whenever I ask my students if they've watched it, they say no. It's usually people, teachers, and you know, people my age and up to teachers, but not the young people that it's actually kind of well, maybe it's more aimed at us to understand them, but that there's a whole scene in the series where a teenager explains to his father how emojis work and how they communicate with emojis, and how they what the different meanings of emojis are that, you know, we completely unaware of. And I remember my children asking me, they saw a message I'd sent with the emoji with the 3 hearts, and they say, you sent that? And I'm like, well, I was just saying it's sweet, it's lovely. And it's like, no, that means you're in love. And I'm like, no, it doesn't. I'm sending it to a group of friends who made a nice cake or something, you know. And to me, it didn't have that meaning. To them, it did. But I mean, encoding meanings and communicating meanings, and miscommunication happens across generations as well. We were talking about cultural differences, and culture is not just different countries or different social strata, but it can be in your own home, because different generations have different cultures, and the codes that they use are very different indeed. Okay, excellent. Snippets. I said we would have snippets of the different groups. Do we have anybody back from this is group 1, perhaps? Yes, group 1. Mariana, would you like to tell us?
Yes. Hi, good morning, everyone. Well, we were talking with Graciela about this topic of literature and the canon. And basically we have like a lot of questions, but no answer, right? Like we talked about this idea of who can and who cannot be introduced to the canon. Along that line, who decides or who has the authority to decide this entry, let's say, into the canon, particularly thinking of English literature, right? Or literature in English, depending on what's your view. We mentioned also the different literary awards that might, let's say, legitimate some authors into this debate. And we ended up, well, of course, mentioning that depending on what's your idea of the canon, like whenever I was telling Graciela that whenever we mention the canon, my instant thought is the classical authors, but because that's pretty much ingrained in our education, right? And it's all part of this sort of colonial thought and European way of seeing the world that we have been
Sorry.
educated into. And well, we were talking about that.
Education does play a huge part in what you're saying, and you know, the books that are selected to be studied, whether it is at university or school or as prescribed texts for a given exam, or that are you know, presented as achievements. And nowadays, obviously, the canon has changed, and we think about the canon in terms of what we studied, and I don't know, of course, Shakespeare, of course, Milton, of course, Keats, of course, all these things that we studied. But then there was probably some later course that we attended, or some seminar or something that dealt with post-colonial literatures, and that dealt with literatures, the empire writing back, and, you know, all these things that in the 90s we were talking about and writing about as innovations and as new voices, but that have become part of the canon nowadays. And perhaps the things that are not part of the, it's a new part of the canon, a new stage that has to do with a new period, but the recognition that these authors and these works get through prizes, as you say, through being selected for reading groups, being selected by publishers, being the bestsellers, being the books that people buy, all these elements contribute. There's not one organization, of course, or one body that will sit in a meeting and decide, okay, this is now part of the canon, this isn't, that should be, that shouldn't be. But it's a contribution of all these committees and all these groups that select the books for different purposes, whether it is to interview the author on a TV program, or whether it is, or a podcast nowadays. Who watches television nowadays, right? It's a podcast that somebody does, or whether it is the books that you see the minute you walk into the bookshop, because they've got a big poster and they've got the pile of books right at the front. It's a different way of shaping the canon. Perhaps it's not the established, it's not just the contribution from the established voices in academia that decide this, although they do have a part. I don't know, Rotten Tomatoes and Goodreads, all these reviews spaces, and all the votes that people contribute to Amazon, to, you know, whatever, that kind of shapes the canon in a different, perhaps more chaotic way, less monolithic, and perhaps that's good. Perhaps there's multiple voices and we don't know who to listen to, but we shouldn't think that the notion of the canon has disappeared. It's just changed shape. It's just adapted to the way in which we shape it nowadays. Perhaps there's a bit more participation. Perhaps there's a bit more people involved in shaping the canon. But then again, maybe there's internet bubbles that shape the canon too, and people who read certain things that will never get to other people. I'm thinking perhaps of books like what's the name of this author? Yeah, Tara Westlover. I don't know if you've had access to. I'm sharing, right, Lou? I think I am.
You're sharing the Canva.
I'm going to show you something that you may have read or not. This book called Educated by Tara Westlover. You can find plenty of interviews with her. And again, this is one of, I came across it the first time because it was a pile in a bookshop, and the book was very visible. And I thought, the educated education, maybe I should take a look at it. What's this about? And I don't know if anybody has read it. Has anybody read it here? Well, you see, this is the bubbles that I was talking about. It's not high literature. I'm not going to claim it's going to change the literary canon, but it's the story of a woman who lived in one of these closed communities in the US that believe in that the apocalypse is coming, and they build shelters and they stock up on things and whatever. And she's the daughter of a man who's got these delusions, well, what we think as delusions, what I think as delusions, and she runs away. And part of the discussion with her family and her father in particular, but her mother as well, was the question of access to education, because they didn't want them to go to school. They wanted them to be homeschooled. They didn't want them to go to university. She ends up going to Oxford, I believe, in the UK, and she ends up going to Harvard or one of the Ivy League universities. And her whole pursuit is she wants to be educated, coming from that sort of background. But then with that experience, she writes this book, which, again, if you look, let's look at Amazon, and it has the 4 stars, in 4.5 stars, however many stars, the audiobook you can get, whatever, right? And you can have a look at the various, the Wikipedia, it's a memoir. The Goodreads will have a review. Now, why would you say you haven't had access to it? Because you didn't see it as part of a bookshop display, or because it's a topic that's not close to home, or because it's not part of a list of a reading group that you are part of, or because it's a topic that is not, there's so many reasons why this could be, right? And perhaps the choices we make condition not only our choices, but also the choices of the people around us. Because if we're part of a reading group, if we prescribe books to students, well, our decisions will also impact others. And what impact do we have in shaping the canon is another interesting question here. I'm just mentioning this one as an example. There's many others, and there's probably many others that you yourselves can contribute to the discussion of the things that are part of your canon that is not part of a more general canon, right? But what matters really.
And if we think of,
anyway, very interesting discussion and contributions here. Let me see, group, let me see. So we had one group, it's going crazy. Give me a second. Group 2, group 3, group 4, understanding life through literature. Do we have any views on understanding life through literature? Hopefully we do, because that's what we're here for. Nobody in that group? Okay. We'll leave that one for further reflection at some other point. Let me see. Literature as art. We had lots of groups expected because we didn't know how many people we'd have here today. But we're running. Time is running out. Literature and history as well.
I can say some things about.
I think we can leave some of these thoughts. Have I lost Lucia? Is Lucia still here? I've lost Lucia. What's happened? Oh, technology is not helping me today. Anyway, let me. Okay, we did put together a little summary. Lucia's back. Hello, Lucia.
I wanted to say something. Sorry, but
it's okay. That's okay.
Can you hear me? I was thinking about the canon. What you were saying before. If we think about AI. What material are we using to train AI? Well, not we particularly, but what material is used to train AI? and what worldview is being, used or shared. So I think that if we think about AI, it's an interesting issue as well.
Absolutely.
What we were saying about the canon, right?
Well, the other day somebody, I think it was in a class, somebody said to me that AI is becoming more and more stupid because it's being asked more and more stupid questions. But that's by the by. But I listened to an interesting podcast. I'd have to find it and retrieve it because I think it would be interesting for this group, because it had to do with copyright and authors' rights, and the debate around something that Facebook did and Meta did in poaching books from a number of sites and using them to train the AI. And the whole discussion was around the authors being crossed, that their style could be copied, and that the AI could write in the style of, and to make matters worse, the fact that they're not being paid for it. I'm going to retrieve it, and we're going to post it because it's an interesting example of the debates that are happening around creativity, and that connects with the art issue. Who pays for art? Of course, we know that throughout history, art, the funding of art has come from different sources. The Medicis in Italy paid for art that they liked and not for other art. And nowadays, it's who decides. And we have a little video towards the end of today for you to think about what influences our choices in terms of what we like and what we don't like. And it's access, as we mentioned, but also what we are exposed to that influences all our views without us realizing, sometimes even. Okay. In any case, here what we have is some connections between some of the books that you mentioned that you'd been reading and some of the topics that we've discussed in literature in English. And we just wanted to make connections because some of them, of course, had already been made in the slides and the videos and the course, because they're classics like Frankenstein. But there are also points that connect many of the things that you've read, and perhaps things that other people in the group may want to read in connection to these topics. That's why we connected these things. So there's the issue of artificial intelligence and post-humanism, what makes a human human. They showed an interesting robot in the news. They're very human-shaped humanoid robot in an exhibit that they're having in Osaka recently. I'll see if I can get a clip of that, built by the Chinese. Of course, the issue of post-colonialism and decolonizing literature, and we have many examples here from authors like Salman Rushdie and various other authors. I'm working particularly with the examples from the Windrush generation in some of my courses, because I'm using some of the material that relates to the Afro-Caribbean populations in Britain. Many of you have probably seen or heard Benjamin Zephaniah when he was in Argentina at the book fair, for example, and understanding how people come to be where they come to be and where their roots are is quite interesting. Somebody said that they've read Girl, Woman, Other, which is a book I'm using again in some of my courses, which also brings a lot of these notions into discussion. Gender and queer studies, Girl, Woman, Other, there it is, top of the list, which it's in this list because it does deal with issues of gender and identity and intersectional identities, particularly in the context of Black British women's lives and multiracial people. But many of the things that are discussed there are very interesting. The use of the lack of punctuation and the multiple points of view are an interesting aspect of this book, which won the Booker Prize, talking about the canon, won the Booker Prize, the Man Booker Prize, with together with the Testaments by Margaret Atwood. Anyway, you've got many interesting things to look at here. The climate crisis and eco literature. My daughter would not let me forget that because she's studying environmental studies, and I've got 2 tubs of compost in my house, one outside, one inside, and so. But it is a very serious concern, particularly for young people who are aware of these issues, and many of whom have become vegetarians, for example, as a result of their concern for the environment. It used to be what used to prevail was issues related to animal welfare, but more recently it's eco concerns, right? Dystopian tech and surveillance, all the way from 1984 to the present, and then again I'll mention Black Mirror again, or years and years. A lot of this we consume in audiovisual form, but it's very present, and it can be very distressing as well, especially for young people who get really upset. And I remember, I think it was last year, my son, who's now 17, said to me, but what should I study if AI is going to do everything? It's a difficult question to answer to a 16-year-old. My answer was, of course, study something you like, something you enjoy doing. But I can't really tell him that he's going to have a job with whatever it is, right? Anyway, and maybe jobs are not what matters, because that's the future of work is also at stake. And this connects to mental health and trauma in general, and in many of these cases that I mentioned here, Sylvia Plath, of course, but in contemporary concerns, mental health related to this lack of certainty, lack of any certainty in the future, right? And what who we are and what we do, and how what we do defines what we are and who we feel we are. And maybe that will change in the future. Translation and global Englishes, going back to the concern that was mentioned about, how do we translate this or that, and the increasing contact between different groups of people in different parts of the world. We know that global Englishes exist. I keep getting students who feel distressed that they've studied English for, I don't know, a decade or longer, and then I present them with English that they don't understand, and they go into a panic. And I'm like, okay, then what do you do with this? What should you do with this? And how do we think about this? Do you understand all versions of Spanish that exist? Does that make you less of a user of Spanish or less of a speaker of Spanish? Probably not. But then we should be exposed, as Marian does in his class, expose students to a range of options, not necessarily to take them as models, because we can't be everyone. It's impossible. But we should know they exist, and we should know that perhaps they shouldn't be penalized because they stray away from the what is it, RP, Standard British English? What is it that is the model? Yes, Marianne.
You now call it GB, General British, or GA, General American?
And my question still is, who speaks that? What is General British? What is General American? And
1%.
Yeah, but I mean, It's like the quote, I don't know if it's apocryphal, but you know, Daniel Jones is supposed to have been asked who speaks RP, and he said, well, I do, and my brother does. But you know, it's a big debate anyway. Okay, and just to close this brief overview of topics, I thought I'd show you this little video, which is just a few minutes, and then we'll leave it open to questions and to opinions, and we'll see what you think. This is something that cuts across many of the topics that we've been mentioning, in the sense that it influences them all, and it influences us all in terms of what shapes our views and how we think about things. Note that it is how the media shapes the way we view the world, and it's made by the BBC. So take it with a pinch of salt.
All over the world, in every country, in every culture, storytelling has significant power.
Can you hear
The stories
it?
that we are told via books, our screens, and advertising build identities, determine behaviours, and forge our dreams. American researchers found that stories repeated in our minds
Can you hear it? Is it okay? Okay, good.
actually interact with our biology. Our brains need shortcuts to simplify and organise information and data constantly coming at us. They impact how we view the world and make meaning from what we perceive. The narrative we tell and are told has the potential to create and continue prejudiced beliefs by those few who dominate the storytelling sphere. So, what dangerous ways has this materialised itself in the media and advertising? The British Film Institute found that between 2006 and 2016, of around 45,000 roles credited to actors in the UK,
Sorry. I've just been warned that the video is on fast. I normally listen to videos like that, but I don't need to inflict that on people. I'm sorry.
all over the world, in every country and every culture, storytelling has significant power. The stories that we are told via books, our screens, and advertising build identities, determine behaviours, and forge our dreams. American researchers found that stories repeated in our minds actually interact with our biology. Our brains need shortcuts to simplify and organise information and data constantly coming at us. They impact how we view the world and make meaning from what we perceive. The narrative we tell and are told has the potential to create and continue prejudiced beliefs by those few who dominate the storytelling sphere. So, what dangerous ways has this materialised itself in the media and advertising? The British Film Institute found that between 2006 and 2016, of around 45,000 roles credited to actors in the UK, only 0.5% were played by Black British actors. Not seeing yourself represented often leads to self-imposed limitations on what you can achieve and allows for negative perceptions to go unchallenged. And when Black people are represented, there are many reoccurring racialised tropes, most of which can be traced back to colonialism, historic anti-Blackness, and the legacy of slavery. 64% of UK crime films has featured roles for Black actors, and 15% of all films featuring Black actors between 2006 and 2016 focused on crime narratives. You've probably come across a few other stereotypes within a range of film, TV shows, and adverts. The mammy, the Jezebel, the angry, sassy Black woman, the stoic, the gangster, the angry Black man, and the Black best friend. These notions of who Black people are were created by white storytellers throughout history, carefully crafted to dehumanize and erase the multiplicity of Black people's existence. Take, for example, one of the most historical tropes, the mammy. Academy Award-winning Hattie McDaniel famously played this role in Gone with the Wind in 1939. Her performance as a loyal, subservient caregiver had been created by white American storytellers to distance themselves from the harsh reality of race relations in a post-slavery society. In light of the 2020 Black Lives Matter protests, the streaming platform HBO Max removed the film due to the racist depictions, later republishing it with disclaimers about the historical context and warnings about racial stereotypes in the film. In current pop culture, we are often shown racist caricatures, the angry Black woman we see on reality TV, and the hyper-violent Black man in gritty documentaries. These depictions are in part informed by colorism, a phrase coined by the author and activist Alice Walker, which means the prejudiced treatment of those within the Black community who have darker skin. In on-screen storytelling, there is an easy way to tick the boxes of so-called diversity without having to critically engage with anti-Black bias. Often, this is done by the use of mixed race or light-skinned characters. Usually, a character's proximity to whiteness, whether that be through them having fairer skin, a white parent, partner, or friend, often increases their social standing, presumed likability, and success, further constructing and upholding racist perceptions. As of 2018, the average American spends over 11 hours a day watching, listening, reading, and interacting with media. Therefore, mass media has the power to challenge and change perceptions. The next time you see an ad, watch a film, or a TV show, ask yourself whose voice is telling this story and who is it trying to represent. And for the storytellers amongst you, strive to give the same platform and voice for people to tell their own stories and shape their own identities, so that in the future we can show endless possibilities of who Black people can be and what we can dream.
Okay, so that was just to give you an overview of something that impacts many of the topics that we've discussed. I guess we can open the floor and listen to people's opinions and ideas, and maybe have people put up their hands, and so we can listen to them. Excellent. Marian.
All right. At the moment, I love science fiction, and I'm watching this one on Netflix. It's this A Discovery of Witches. So there are witches, vampires, and demons. Let's see, who plays the demons?
Of course.
And I was like thinking about that. Why them? I mean, of course, there are many, but actually the leader is a Black woman. And I said,
There's no, okay, I'm getting echo, so let me sort it out. It's not only who plays what, but who is totally absent. Because, you know, this whole discussion around race and ethnicity, which is very present in the US, and it's very pervasive, and we see it a lot in material like this. We see it a lot in cultural productions, like literary productions, etc. Sometimes takes us by surprise. I remember having to fill in a form when I took my kids to a US school for 3 months in 2019, school in the US, because I was there for a visit for 3 months, and I took them to school January, February, and March. They still love me for it, not. But anyway, I didn't have to submit their passports because they didn't want to see any ID, because this was California, and California was a haven for anybody who is an immigrant or suspected of being an immigrant or whatever. So no ID, but I had to fill out a form with their ethnic profile. So I had to say, and I know that these exist not for discrimination purpose, but for anti-discrimination purposes. Like if you apply for a job, you'll be asked to fill out a form that will be separated from your application to monitor the recruitment practices of a company, right? So you declare who you are and what your profile, so that if 90% of the people who apply for the job are African American, and the person picked is white all the time, then the company can be whatever. Anyway, defining us in terms of their categories was extremely difficult, right? Because there was a cross between nationality and ethnicity, and are you Latino? But then they look at us and they say, no, but you're not. My kids have an English surname, they have an English part. It just doesn't make any sense, right? But it's so much part of the way things work. I have another friend who's lived in the States. Well, she now doesn't, but her children grew up in the States. She's from Argentina. Her husband's American, sort of Viking looking, and they have that surname. And she always declared them as Latino because that gave them access to perks and quotas and possibilities. And she said, well, they're my children. And so that worked for them, or not, I don't know. But it's tricky. It's very, very tricky, because it is a cultural instrument that doesn't that we don't relate to, we don't identify with. Yes. Comments, opinions? I know we've discussed a lot of things in a very short space of time. We've been running around from one meet to the other. And Lucia has something to share with us that you can, or do you want me to show it, Lou? Yes, you want me to?
I don't know if I can.
Okay.
Can
I
I?
need to reshare this. It's one little activity that we were going to do earlier, but that we didn't make it to. How can I find it? Where is it? Wait a sec. Where is the...
Yeah, if I can, I'll do it myself.
Imagine that most of you have done Mentimeters at this point in time. You know what Mentimeter is. And let me see where
there it is.
In the
Can you see
slides. Oh, it's not in the slides. You're going to place the link in the chat, Lou?
You've got
there it is. Oh,
the QR code.
Maybe you can put the link in the chat as well. And we can share this later. And the idea is for you to just get into Mentimeter and contribute what you believe your thank you, Lou. Your key takeaways are, the key notions that were discussed today and that maybe are part of the course, so that we end up with another word cloud that may be helpful to remind us of some of the main points that we've been talking about. In the meantime, if you want, you can share any other views that haven't been shared so far. Or you're hard at work on the Mentimeter, I don't know. We can probably get to, you should be able to get to the actual, there it is, it's coming up. Excellent. So we had included some that were our ideas. Understanding, collaboration, I love those. Yes, we need to develop greater understanding, and collaboration is one of the key areas in which we will be doing this. I've been working quite a lot with a few institutions that are thinking about new ways of teaching and new ways of teaching English in particular, because the profile of our students is changing quite a bit, and the way in which they access the language and their needs and their motivations is also changing quite a lot. And so we're exploring new ways of teaching and new ways of learning that students are into. Culture and identity very prominently appear, absolutely. Anticipatory fiction. In connection with that, you may know that some universities have, like they used to have departments, history departments. Now some universities have future studies departments, where they are exploring, you're probably familiar with the reports, The Future of English and English Next, that all these things that I'm mentioning, Lou, we should include them in the material. David Gradle wrote The Future of English and English Next for the British Council, and then another version of The Future of English was published after his death. These are reports for the British Council, which, as you know, is a cultural promotion organization for the British government, really. But those reports connect with this idea of future studies, in the sense that we always said we had to study history in order not to make the same mistakes of the past. But now we think that, as well as studying history, we need to think about the future and what the future will bring, because the changes are so fast that it's very difficult to cope with those changes if we don't look at and think about what will happen. Privacy and surveillance are quite connected, and we see them connected in dystopian literature and dystopian fiction in general. So that's the canon appears quite prominently. Sensitivity, knowledge, understanding, quite empathy, a lot of skills that are not necessarily developed through formal education. Some people have them more enhanced, but I think we need to work more on those things through the work we do with students, because we sometimes neglect. I mean, there's talk of emotional education and developing, awareness of these things, but they should. The question is how to work on them and how to help students develop empathy, for example. Yes, we want them to be empathic. How do we go about it, right? Feedback, providing feedback is an important element. Democratic practices, yes, they are losing ground in many places, unfortunately. It's a bit scary. Excellent. Okay, well, we've run over like 50% of the time we'd said we'd take from your lovely non-working morning. It's a beautiful day outside, at least where we are, but where I am, where many of us are in the city of Buenos Aires. I hope it's a beautiful place where you are as well. Beautiful weather, a beautiful place too. And I hope that you've had a restful long weekend so far, and that you have a restful weekend for the rest of the weekend. And we'll continue to see each other online and in the forums, and we hope to see your participation there and your contributions. I'm going to stop the recording, and we can stay a few minutes and chat about anything that hasn't been said so far. But for those of you leaving, my dog just walked behind me but didn't bark, thankfully. So we'll be seeing you online in the rest of the course. See you around.